I want to introduce our first speaker, who is Ceri. I met Ceri by email when she got in touch with me to tell me that she'd won the Recovery Street Festival for her extraordinary film, Understanding Mum. Her prize was presented to her by, listen to this, the HRH, the Duchess of Cambridge. And afterwards, Ceri told her all about Nacoa. How could you not love someone who tells the Duchess about Nacoa? And, we've written to her and we're still hopeful that, one day she may endorse our work. And Ceri also won the Recovery Street Festival for the second time last year with her beautiful film, Understanding Me. And it strikes me that this is a journey played out time and time again on the helpline, when children call firstly about their parents, and then over a period of time it stops being about the drinking parent, it starts being about them and what they can do to help themselves, irrespective of whether their parent drinks. And that's certainly where Nacoa does its best work. Ceri's also won the AdFam Gary Seaman Award and Nacoa's Maya Parker Award for immense personal heroism. And I know tonight this is huge, because Ceri doesn't speak in public, so please give her a very, very warm welcome.
Thank you, Hilary. Thank you. I'm not really sure where to start, so I'll start by saying I'm the child of an alcoholic. And this is my journey on how I'm trying to fix my mum. It all started in 1986 when I was 4 years old. My mum was a confident, outgoing, amazing mum, and she met a new man. She became infatuated with him. She moved in with him after a week, and she married him after a month. And very quickly, he became violent. I think she drank to try and block out the pain. His chaotic lifestyle meant that we moved around the country so much. By the time I was 9, I'd moved house 20 times. I went to 7 primary schools. The bailiffs took our things away and my grandparents whenever they needed to. They kept me safe and they followed me around the country, and they helped me be who I am today. They were my security. But wherever I was, I still missed my mum. The violence was also psychological. My mum would get ready for work in the morning and she put a uniform on, and then my stepdad would put her into a cold bath. Once she forgot her door key, so he made her smash her own head through the glass. After a week she had terrible headaches, and when she finally went to the hospital, she had a blood clot in her brain. They said if she hadn't gone in that day, she would have died. I remember a nurse coming into the room after she'd had the operation and saying, "Is there anything you want to tell me?" And just age 7, I remember saying, "Come on, now's your chance." But she would never tell anyone. It's not easy to leave someone, and if she ever threatened to leave, he'd threaten to kill me. When I was 9, my stepdad became so controlling that he locked us in the flat. And one weekend, we'd been in all weekend, Mum was sober and he was drunk. So I crawled down the corridor and I took the keys from out of his pocket and I went into Mum and I said, "Come on, let's go. We can finally escape." And we ran, we were free. We ran across the city and we went to my grandparents' house. The problem is now, Mum was in the grips of addiction. And she met a new man who was kind and caring, but it was too late really. So I stayed with her throughout my teenage years, but my new normal was keeping the house clean, keeping my clothes clean, making sure that nobody knew what was going on, nobody knew about Mum's drinking, and tipping the drink away, thinking that would help. And when Mum tried to stop drinking, it was dealing with the hallucinations and the sickness and the physical pain. It was just horrendous to watch. When I was 19, I moved out. And I got a job working for children's centres where I decided I wanted to help other people. And I had this lovely boss, and for the first time ever I decided to tell someone. And about a week later she said, "Come on, Ceri, let's go for a walk, I want to talk to you." She said, "Ceri, your mum's going to die. You've got to stop trying to fix her." I told me this before. It never even crossed my mind. My job in life was to fix my mum. I hadn't had a childhood, I just had to protect her and make sure that I stopped her drinking. That day, I decided to make less contact with my mum. So I started ringing her every day, but only visiting her once a month. And it really made a difference because it was making me quite poorly too. When I was 21, in the April, Mum went into hospital. She had so much fluid on her stomach by now they kept pumping it off. Her skin was yellow and her eyes were yellow. And I remember one day she rang me and she said, I'm going home. And I rang the hospital and my jaw was so tight I couldn't speak. I said, what are you doing? You can't send her home, she's not ready, she's not well. But there was no psychological help back then, and she was really scared to go home, but they sent her anyway. No one would hear me. In the July that year we had an argument. I went to visit her and I decided to tell her I was having counselling. She said, why? I said, because of you, Mum, I can't cope. This is too much for me. And she said, cope with what? There's nothing going on. So I stormed out. The next evening she called me. She said, I'm so sorry. I know it's my fault. I've been to the doctors and I've got some new medication. By now, Mum hadn't eaten any food for 2 years, so she couldn't swallow the tablets they gave her. So she started medicine. And that night she died. She was 47 and she died of alcoholic liver cirrhosis. I'm so glad we had that last conversation, but unfortunately it was too late. Now I'd like to tell you my story. I'm 38 and I'm married with 2 children. As Hilary's already said, my Nacoa journey started with Recovery Street Film Festival. I found out it was the theme was recovery from addiction, and I wasn't sure whether to enter because I was recovering from someone else's addiction. But since I'd had my son, I was really struggling as I had such a strong bond with him and I couldn't understand where mine had gone wrong with my mum. So I entered and somehow I won. And I sent my film to Nacoa and I got such a lovely response from Hilary. They put it on their website, but I wasn't ready to share it with anyone else yet, but I was really pleased that other people were seeing it that needed to. I judged the festival for 2 years, and in 2018, the theme was my light bulb moment. Well, my light bulb moment was finding Nacoa and realising that my mum's drinking wasn't my fault, and that I'm not my mum. Surprisingly, I won again. This time, I didn't fear the stage. For the first time in my life, the mask was off. I could be anxious, and it was okay. And that day, I decided to love my broken bits. I set up a small ethical clothing company called Dreaming of Eden. Something felt like it was missing from it. It wasn't quite fulfilling enough. So I decided to do ranges in aid of Nacoa. I did slogans like love your broken bits and go your own way. And it was the first time I could engage with people on social media and discuss things that I'd never been able to before. And the messages were just amazing that I got from people. From friends that I've known since I was really little to perfect strangers, everybody knows someone who's affected by parental drinking. And I was always able to signpost them on to Nacoa. This time last year, I watched Sky News and watched Josh and Calum. And I watched it and realised I was watching with no judgment. And I thought, maybe it's time I shared my story a little bit more. We really need to keep speaking out if we can, if we feel able to help others feel less alone, even if one person hears just like I listened to them last year. The first thing I did was I ran 64 miles alone over a month, 64 to represent my mum's age last year, and alone to represent how those children feel. And as I ran, I listened to Fern Cotton's Happy Place podcast, and Russell Brand was being interviewed. And in that, he talks about when we live our life for our own ego, we can never feel fulfilled. But if we start to live our life for others and to get nothing back in return, that's when we really find our purpose. And that moment, everything changed for me. And I realised that my purpose is to be the voice of children of alcoholics. The little versions of me. I really felt that I was on my own. And something I've realised this week that I've been struggling with a bit is, what if I had called Nacoa? What if they'd helped to keep me safe? And what if I'd trusted them enough? This is hard for me to say now. My mum might have still been here. I might have been brave enough to tell someone, and they might have got her help. So that is the main reason that I really want to help them now. So I decided to say yes to everything. I stepped out of my comfort zone. I made a film for Coa Week. I went on BBC Sussex on a radio panel with other professionals. I did a big newspaper article, and I walked 1 million steps with a group of wonderful Nacoa ladies. And one of the highlights has to be seeing Calum best in one of my t-shirts. Last week, I did a series called Short Clips on Radio 4, which will be broadcast in the next few weeks. And I've got something else very exciting coming up, which I can't quite share with you yet. Over the last year, I've got my 2 dream jobs. I now work for the Oasis project in Brighton and another new project called Back on Track, all supporting families going through addiction. And last year, like Hilary said, I won the Nacoa Mayor Park Award, and that was a real highlight for me. Some days, my anxiety is crippling, but most days are good. What I can do now is focus on the good days. I've recently been having CBT, and my core beliefs are really quite sad. I think I'm unlovable, I'm not normal, and that the world isn't safe. But now I understand these beliefs, I can really live in the present and connect to my past, understand it, but carry on living in the now. Children of alcoholics are people pleasers. We try and fix people, and we think other people's pain is our fault sometimes. We have a superpower like now. I can read the room and see how everybody's feeling. I think I can. And the thing that I love most is that I don't live my life practically. I live my life by feelings, by my instincts, by my guts, and that's why I think I live the life that I live now. As I've got no close family, it's quite hard for me to trust people when they say kind things. But finding Nacoa and Josh and Piers and Hilary, I really do believe in myself now, and it's all because of everything you've done, so thank you. I've been through many emotions with my mum, but now I remember her separately to the addiction, and that's taken a long time. I wrote a piece for Nacoa on her birthday last year, and then I won the ASFAM Family Voices competition. I'd like to read that to you now, because I think it represents how I feel about it after all of Nacoa's support, and then I'll show you my film. Thank you for listening. It's all too easy to look back on the chaos of my childhood with anger and sadness, but now I understand addiction better. So now, I just want to say thank you, Mum. Thank you for the 4 years you gave me before alcohol crept in. Thank you for carrying me, for keeping me safe inside you, for feeding me milk for my first year. Sounds to me like we once had a wonderful bond. Thank you for waiting for me at the school gates on the days you could get there. You never knew the excitement I felt when I saw you as I peeped round the door. It wasn't very often. Sometimes weeks or months went by, but I want you to know I just loved it. I still remember your blue hoodie. It was so cosy to snuggle into. Thank you for being so brave when you knew it got too much. It must have been hard to let me go, but in your own way you made sure I was safe. Sometimes it just wasn't right for me to be with you, and Grandad did a great job. He wasn't you though, and I secretly cried too most days. Thank you for trying again and again repeatedly to stay sober. You were so strong to do it, and the side effects of that were most painful to watch. You were a warrior in those times, and I was with you, holding your hand through the chaos that ensued. You even once said out loud that you knew there was a problem. I can't imagine how hard that must have been. Thank you for the ridiculous chats. We talked about anything. There was no slurring. You didn't judge, you cared. I know you did deep down, and that's taken me 15 years to say, but I get it now. And do you know why? Because I'm recreating those magical glimpses of you with my babies. Those tiny special moments are running through me, and as much as you've broken me and made me worry of the mum I am, I also love the mum I'm becoming because of you. I laugh until I cry with them. I'm ridiculously silly with them. I get on their level sometimes, and there is no parent and child, just a stream of magic that we're all part of, and that's from you. And I know once you felt it too. I know you started with a bond, a strong attachment, because if not, why can't I think of the grandparent you'd be without my chest aching, literally a breathtaking physical pain. I will always try to separate my memories of you from the drink and remember the sober times, however small they were, and I'll tell them about the real you, just my mum. Tomorrow I may feel different. No 2 days are the same, but today I just want to thank you.
Well, so I'm not going to say any more, but thank you. And I think you've done brilliantly, haven't you? It's been wonderful. And your films are truly wonderful, and they're on the website. And we hope you make many more. You have a gift, that's for sure. So now it's my pleasure to introduce John Ashworth. Yeah. I know who you are this year. Do you remember that? John and Liam have done so much for this charity and so much for children of alcoholics. And last year, when they spoke, they had each of them made what they called the most difficult speeches of their lives, which was talking about their own lives, about their personal experiences. And John described his talking about it as entirely by accident. I was inundated by people getting in touch with similar stories and saying that they remembered leaving their parent in the morning to go to school never knowing whether they would be the same person when they got home that night. We are forever surprised by the number of people who have been affected by parents drinking. We are everywhere. Despite saying he often feels guilty after speaking publicly, a feeling of betraying his father, John continues to raise his head above the parapet and runs the London Marathon for Nacoa. And he's raised over 21,000 to date, and he is running for the 4th time.
I will do the spotlight next year.
Really? Oh, okay. It was a really... Okay. I'm really sorry. I'm really...
That's all right.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for doing it next time. It was just a really nice round number. Nacoa's 30 years. You know. Anyway. So, but it's lovely.
You can take my place if you want.
Take me hours to get around. You could also do the Nacoa Big Walk. I think we have one more place. But thank you, and I am sorry I didn't mean to. But what I am going to tell you all is the same thing I said last year. Have you heard the line, there is no such thing as a free lecture at the House of Commons. Your ticket price tonight is sponsoring John when he runs the London Marathon, and I have your email addresses, and I will be in touch with you. So thank you, John, for everything you've done, and look forward to hearing what you're doing as opposed to not doing.
Right.
Sorry.
Well, thank you very much. Shall I just say?
Yeah, there you go.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome to the House of Commons. Is this your first time here? Were you at the lecture last year? Well, you're very welcome. You're all very welcome here. And I thought your presentation and speech there was so brave, so courageous, so moving, and so powerful. And I just really want to pay tribute to you. And I think we should all, again, show our appreciation. It's great to be here on the panel again with such old friends and distinguished speakers, various famous faces, various people who have spoken on panels before, like Tony and Calum, because Josh, who's on the he's on the television more often than Simon Cowell, it seems like these days. But it is a real pleasure to be here, and I was delighted to have been asked again to say a few words because I'm a Labour MP. I'm Labour's Shadow Health Secretary, and to be frank, given that my party has just lost the general election, there's not many organisations inviting us to come in. So to be frank, it gave me something to do, to be honest. That's the spirit. It is good to be here because this is a cause for which I am desperately passionate about. And Nacoa is an organisation for which I've run 3 London marathons for. I missed the deadline for this year's, and we had such an exhausting end of 2019 as politicians. I just sort of felt that I might just take a year off, but I will run it next year for Nacoa, and I'll try and find some other event to put myself through this year where perhaps we can raise a bit of money. I did actually want to run the marathon, but it's a slightly serious point. This is that politics and Brexit has been pretty full on, as I'm sure a lot of you can understand, and we've been running we've been working non-stop pretty much. And the honest answer is the application came round for the marathon run. And I just felt that given I've spent virtually every weekend away from home for months now, it just struck me that, in some ways, it's almost slightly hypocritical of me to come around and make speeches about the impact on children and loved ones of an addiction to alcohol, while I'm ignoring my own addiction to work and not spending time at home with my children. And it hit me really that, I grew up in a household where my father had a drink problem, an addiction to alcohol, which it led to the breakup of the marriage. It led to me living in a house with a father who was always drunk. Never violent, never or anything like that, but just constantly drunk. The fridge was always full of bottles of white wine, which he would drink and drink and drink. I, as a child, had to go to the corner shop to buy food and so on. Increasingly, particularly when I was a teenager, I found myself looking after him increasingly. And it clearly impacted on me, coloured my life, and then I've been thinking really about my own children. And although I'm not addicted to alcohol, I do have a drink. I'm not teetotal. I haven't gone down that road, but I think I probably am, or at least have been, addicted to work. There's always a conference to speak at a weekend. I live in Leicester, but those of you who follow politics closely will know, or perhaps it hadn't occurred to you, but what happens in politics is Sundays are very big political days in politics. There's lots of big TV shows on Sundays in politics. Well, if you've got to be in a TV studio at 8:30 on a Sunday morning, or 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, the transport links aren't great to get down to London on a Sunday morning from Leicester, so that means coming down on a Saturday evening. It just struck me that I go around the country making speeches, not just about how alcohol addiction impacts on children, and yet I'm not spending time at home with my own children. And perhaps I need to sort of refocus my own work-life balance. Perhaps I don't need to be on my phone all weekend checking emails, responding to tweets, seeing what other politicians are saying about things, because I don't want my children coming to events like this when they're in their 30s and saying that their father was addicted to work and that's damaged them. So this is a sort of roundabout way of saying that I thought, well, I just haven't been away for so long. I probably just need to spend a bit of time at home, because marathon training does take you out of the house for hours or whatever. But I do enjoy running the marathon, and unfortunately, I know you're all too kind and polite and won't want to say anything, but I certainly know it's having an impact on me not doing the marathon training. So I probably will get back into it for next year, but I'm just going to have a year off if that's okay. This isn't a sort of party political event. That wouldn't be appropriate, but one of the reasons, or I should say that one of the reasons why I myself was personally keen to become the Secretary of State for Health, as I say, we didn't, and it's not an event to get into the politics of all that, but one of the things that I really wanted to do as Health Secretary was really make addiction a priority. Because I do think we're in the grip of an addiction crisis in the country. If you look at the statistics now, more and more people admitted to hospital with a condition related to alcohol abuse. More and more people dying from drug misuse. Gambling addiction becoming ever more prevalent as well. We've actually got a phenomena beginning here in the UK, which we've seen for many years in the United States. It's called deaths of despair. This is where people in the middle, sort of between their teenage years and up until about the age of 49, more and more people taking their own life, dying from alcohol-related, diseases, liver cirrhosis or whatever, or drug misuse, drug overdoses. This is increased. It's been happening for a long time in America. We're now seeing that in this country for the first time. More and more people dying in that cohort. And I just think that because there's no, let's be honest, there's probably no votes for politicians and getting up and saying we're going to put more money into addiction services, or we're going to help people who've got a drug problem or an alcohol problem. So you don't, sadly, not enough politicians speak about it. But one of the things I really wanted to do, should I have been fortunate enough to become the Health Secretary, was to really prioritise this issue and do something about it. Because although as I'm not doing it this year, and I do actually generally enjoy running marathons and raising money for organisations like Nacoa, we shouldn't be relying on people like me running marathons in order to fund the sorts of services that Nacoa offer, although of course there'll always be an important role for the voluntary and charity sector. So I suppose the point I want to make is that even though, the Labour Party is in a moment of flux, we're getting a new leader and so on, and I don't even know whether I'll be carrying on as Labour's health spokesperson or not. That'll be for a new leader. But I suppose the point I want to emphasise is that even though I wasn't lucky enough to become the Health Secretary, that this will be an agenda and a priority area for me, whatever happens, because of the personal interest, but also because so many people are being let down at the moment. I just want to pay tribute to Nacoa for the work that you've done. I think it is extraordinary now that this issue, the way alcohol impacts on children, is being talked about in the way in which it wasn't even 5 years ago. And that's a tribute to everybody on this panel, who are all in their own different ways, have go on the media, write about this issue, do very brave, courageous interviews. I've done interviews with some of you together on the media, and all of you I know will continue to make very brave and courageous interventions. And what I've noticed is the more that I speak about it, or indeed the more that the issue is in the media, the more and more people come and stop me in the street and talk to me about it. And there's more and more people who are politicians in here, or famous people, who just come up to me quietly and say, you know what you're doing, what you thought? That was exactly the same as me. In fact, I was talking to somebody yesterday, just by chance in here, a famous actor and comedian, just happened to be in here, because this is a place where people come, all kinds of people come in and out all the time, who just came up to me and said, you're that guy, aren't you? You're a politician who speaks about this. And he said to me, thank you for what you're doing. I'm in exactly the same situation. I actually invited him to this event and asked him if he wanted to come and speak at it, but he said to me, I've never spoken about it publicly and I don't want to speak about it. It's not, I've got family, I don't really want to make a sort of public statement on it. So I won't get involved in it, but I just want you to know that we very much appreciate what you're doing and it affects so many people. And I think that is the thing about this. It is a sort of hidden epidemic. And the work that everybody on this panel, who are speaking with great courage and eloquence and bravery, when you do that, it's offering comfort to somebody out there. And if it's helping somebody out there turn to Nacoa or other similar organisations that offer support and help, then we are, as we have heard so powerfully, potentially saving someone's life. So thank you for everything that you're doing. As we've heard, if I'd have known about Nacoa when I was growing up, it probably would have helped me deal with my own dad. And I'm not going to tell the story about my own, because you've probably all heard it anyway, and I told it last year and the year before, and you'll all know it when it's on the internet anyway. If you really want to know, go and see my own, learn more about my own circumstances. But I do remember very vividly not knowing where to turn to as a child, not knowing who to speak to, not knowing whether to speak to a teacher or somebody involved in the local sort of youth club, just bottling it up and keeping it to myself. And that's why organisations like this are so powerful, so important, and have my full support. So thank you very much. I will run a marathon again. I will continue to press on this agenda, whatever happens to me in this uncertain political world, whether I'm in this post or a different post. And you will always have my full support. I'm always with you, and I'm always willing you on to succeed and go further. Thanks a lot.
does mean a lot, and certainly Liam and Caroline Flint and Liam Byrne did change the world when they found us, and I am eternally grateful to you, because every time someone speaks, a child might hear. They may not even tell you they've heard, but they've heard. It's a thing, and we need to listen to them. That's what we need to do. As part of the APPG stuff, I met Camilla Tominey. You were at, I think, the launch of the manifesto? Oh, yes. Oh gosh, yes. So, yeah, so sort of Camilla, sort of quite by chance, seems to have found us, and we found you. And really, inspired by her own experiences, she spearheaded a media campaign I don't think anyone could pay for. She's talked so honestly and openly about her mum's drinking, and she's attracted lots of publicity across national media and headlines that were really impossible to ignore. And these headlines actually prompted the biggest increase in calls and emails that we ever had. My mummy is drunk, please read to me. And that is true. We have read stories to children. Heartening plight of children home alone with drunk parents. And my favourite is this: children of alcoholics need nation's support. And then following on from this, there's The Monster Downstairs, which is a BBC Radio 4 documentary, now a podcast. And it reminds me that back in 2016, Liam asked us to forget demons and learn how to talk properly about alcohol problems. And Camilla took up that baton, and she has run with it and continues to run with it. And it really is because of the work that she's been doing, and her selflessly talking about her own experiences and using them, which is why we're here today. So please give her a very, very warm welcome.
Thank you very much indeed. I suppose I really just wanted to talk about resilience today, really, and not just personally, but resilience for this movement and where we need to take it forward. Because having been involved for a few years now, and as you say, I initially ran the media campaign on the Sunday Express, which I think played a role in raising awareness, and obviously the £6 million was also handy from the Department of Health, which many people were involved in, and that was just a very small part of it, the media coverage. And subsequently, what's interesting is when I went to the Telegraph, moved to the Telegraph in September 2018, and I wrote a piece about my mum in there as well, and it was really highly subscribed. Digital journalism these days is all about eyeballs and people subscribing on stories. And there was a sense that actually people do want to hear the human stories at the heart of people's lives, and that it isn't off-putting, and that people can relate and identify with what you're saying. There are times, recently, Fraser Nelson, the editor of The Spectator, asked me to write a guest column, so I thought, what will I write it on? And I didn't have that much time to do it, so I decided to do it on drinking and my mum, and also being a teetotal. And there is a part of me that sort of thinks, you know, shall I still be banging this drum? I'm sure everybody here thinks, well, you've told your story once and you tell it again and you tell it again, and are you repeating yourself to no real end? But I think, why shouldn't we continue to tell our stories? As a journalist, I ask people to tell me their stories again and again and again. This is part of my story, my life story, and I don't think we should shy away from sharing these stories. But I suppose, where do we go from here? And I had a very funny moment in the car. I think I must have had this lecture on my subconscious, and I had my eldest of 3 children in the car. And I don't know if this happens to any other COAs, but I just momentarily was transported back to my 10, 11, 12-year-old self. And I don't know, I had that feeling in the pit of my stomach, which I'm sure many of you can identify with, of just insecurity and the unknown, and that childhood memory I have of not really knowing what I was coming home to, and just feeling that life was completely chaotic and out of balance. And I sort of looked across to my 11-year-old daughter, and I had two emotions about it. The first one was, God, thank God. Well, I sort of thought to myself, what must it like to have that kind of, to have me, a consistent parent most of the time, and to kind of know that your mother's mood is going to be pretty consistent and reliable, and have her come to football matches on a Saturday morning and assemblies and all the rest of it, which sadly was rather lacking in my own childhood. And then second of all, I looked at her and I thought, God, I hope she grows up to be resilient. And I thought that was a bit of a strange emotion, but having looked at Dave's video earlier today, I do think that while we have our sad stories to tell, and at a previous lecture I think somebody raised concerns in the Q&A about the fact that we didn't want the media narrative just to be about our sad stories, that we do have to do our best not to lessen the impact of what's happened, but also to accentuate the positives. You know, I reflect on my experience with my mother, who I can identify with what Kerry's saying there, this dichotomy that you don't want your mother to be synonymous only with their alcoholism, that they're a human being who you can identify with. You know, when I think about how best to mother my children, I reflect on my mother's mothering in a very positive light and accentuate those positives. And I think we do have to be honest with the fact that our childhoods brought up around alcoholism is the making of us. Yeah, at times it can be the breaking of us, but I don't know if I'd be doing what I'm doing today had it not been for that experience. And I also don't think I would change it, because you have the parents you have, you make the best of it, and you try and relay the best bits to your own children. You know, the Philip Larkin poem springs to mind. And I think I reflect really on my own children's future as adults who will start drinking with more than a degree of worry. And the topic of my Spectator article last month was, without wanting to preach and be prudish about drinking, I do worry about our society having drinking as the default setting. And I think we are really doing very, very well to improve the conversation around alcoholism and being the children of alcoholics. And what I think we've done really well is to say, no, we're not going to be marginalised. We're not going to be, oh, drugs and drinking. COA is a thing, right? And we will speak about that from the rooftops. But what I'd really like to see, and actually Kerry's interactions with the Duchess of Cambridge are interesting, because what the Duchess of Cambridge is doing in this early childhood survey is trying to really relate childhood experience to adult life. And this is also what we need to communicate. I think this casualised attitude to drinking in this country is pervasive and dangerous. This idea that my children will go to university and be indoctrinated into some Freshers' Week kind of alcohol-fueled because it's just the thing we do, needs to be a narrative that between us as a community of people we try and change. I'm not down on drinking. I'm not down on controlled drinking. I have no beef whatsoever with anybody having a drink. But what I don't like is this casualisation of binge drinking. You know, we use the word alcoholism and people associate that with a tramp drinking out of a paper bag. You know, my mother was hiding gin bottles in a Chanel bag. Does that make it any better? Drinking isn't always getting up in the morning and having a gin and tonic disguised in an orange squash, as was my mother's wont, but it is repeated binge drinking at the weekend. It's taking the kids down to the pub after school, and when they're checking their watches and wondering why they haven't gone home yet, mum and dad are still propping up the bar. And I just think this kind of idea that this is acceptable social behaviour, because that's what the British do, is a narrative that we need to be more honest about and to try and change. So I think as part and parcel of making this campaign effective, and we had the discussion last year and the year before about the fact that we had achieved so much, but what next? You know, there has been this outpouring of honesty about mental health. That's been brilliant, and the Cambridges and Prince Harry have been involved in that. There is a dialogue around drugs use, but I still think there needs to be a much more honest conversation about drinking per se. And I think from a media perspective, again without preaching, but you know, I don't want to be hearing in headlines phrases like gin o'clock or hurrah for gin. You know, yes, on one hand it's a laugh, but hurrah for gin isn't a phrase I would recognise as favourable to my own childhood experience. So I suppose that's what I wanted to say. Resilience for who we are and who we are because of the problems that we've encountered in our childhood. But equally, I think resilience for this campaign, which more and more people are identifying with for good reason. And I think you don't need to be a COA to have concerns about COAs or alcoholism, or frankly, problem drinking in general, because problem drinking in general, while we may be a unique subgroup, problem drinking is something that touches every person in some way or another, and every family. And I think that is something we need to do more to speak about, hopefully, while avoiding criticisms that we're being prudish or spoil sports.
Thank you very much, Camilla. Josh told me earlier that he's working with colleagues.
Yes.
And I think maybe things that go out with these sort of soap programmes are a way to start people to really look at things, because there's an awful lot of passive drinking going on in lots and lots of soaps and lots of films. And I think that is something that we need to look at, because you know, it causes problems, and it causes problems for children. So, I'm going to introduce you to Josh Connolly, and I could say a million things about Josh Connolly. You probably know most of them. We met in 2015, which was a great year, because that was the year we met Liam Byrne as well. And Josh is a phenomenon, really. He did the Nacoa training. I heard him say this last night on the podcast, the live podcast, and he had an epiphany. His life changed, and it's been such an honour and such a pleasure to see that happening in front of my eyes, and to feel part of that. And you're all part of that, because we're all part of this. I'm not going to say too much because I really am aware of time, but what I'm going to do is introduce Josh with someone else's words. There was a doctor last night who was part of the webcast, is that what you call it? Facebook Live, thank you, sorry. Sorry about this. I know, I got dragged to it, but anyways, it was fantastic, but I had no idea what we were doing. But I thought it was a really good idea, and we're going to do it sort of once every 3 months now, and I think we've talked Dave into doing it, and I think we're going to talk Calum into doing it, and I'm working on Tony, and you too, John. All of us, actually. Yeah,
We'll do it while running the marathon.
Okay, sorry about the marathon thing. So this is what this doctor said, and Piers sent me the message and said, couldn't have said it better myself. And what Dr. Tony says is, thank you, Josh, for a phenomenal webcast just now. Even after 30 years as a doctor, I learned so much today. You and Nacoa have made many people in so many places feel so much less alone in this world.
Awesome.
And that's Josh.
Thank you. Yeah, so before, Calum's going to say a few words before, and then we're going to do a Q&A with David, who I'll introduce in a second.
I'll just be quick. I wasn't set to speak here today, but I was very honoured to be able to speak last year. Last year, my message was very much about what we could do to help the youth and the children and the next generation, which is still my message to this day. But I wanted to take this moment to just come at it on a very much positive, and just to thank Nacoa for, I'm so grateful to be a patron to Nacoa for the past 13 years now. They helped me find passion, they helped me find purpose in some sort of lifestyle I didn't think I would find either. And over the past 13 years, I've watched Nacoa and what their message is and what their mission is help the people that work directly with them. All of us up here that work and try to pass on the message for Nacoa, I've watched it grow. I've watched it help grow each and every person here. Some people have made films. Some people have made clothing lines to then find a way to pass on the message to the next generation, where in a place and a time where there's still this stigma, you've got to find a way to update the message and make it modern and make it youthful or something that can resonate with the next person. So I watched it turn Josh from a person who came onto the news and was nervous to talk to somebody who goes onto Facebook Live last night and helps change people's lives. I've watched it, myself was able to climb mountains and go and climb a mountain called Mont Blanc and use it as a reason to try to teach the kids that no matter what the challenge is, you can always overcome it. So my main message today was just to say to Nacoa, thank you for giving us a tool and an opportunity to share your message through us to everybody that we can, and give us all more hope, confidence, passion, and purpose. So I thank you for that.
You sure? Okay, so I'll take this one then. Right, so you can hear me. Thank you, by the way, to both of you for the words. Look, I just want to quickly say that one of the things that I took from what I said on the Facebook Live yesterday is the very thing that I believed kept me alone in this world attaches me to more people than I could ever have imagined, right? And I think that's very true in this room. Nacoa has changed my life, like Calum said. And I remember when we sat in here for the first ever APPG, right? And lots of people, somebody spoke from another charity and they said the biggest issue we've got is children of alcoholics don't speak. And we sat there like, that's not true. The Nacoa stats show that's not true. And I think when you look at this bench, we've got some amazing people proving that that's not true. So I want to introduce now David Coldwell. For anyone that doesn't know him, he's the best boxing trainer in Sheffield. Yeah, in Sheffield. Yeah. And we found out about David. I do a lot of. I'm a big boxing fan, and I watch a lot of interviews on TV. And I watched David's interview on the telly, on the YouTube, and I was just really struck by his vulnerability and what he was able to say. And I remember shouting to my wife and saying, "Leah, David Coldwell's one of us." And she said, "Who?" And I said,
That's what a lot of people say.
I said David Coldwell, and she did say, "Oh, the boxing trainer," because she has to watch boxing with me. The people that David will reach in the way that he's spoken is huge. To have particularly a male in such a sort of masculine environment that he's in, I don't think he will quite be aware yet of the impact that he will have. But we're going to talk about it. So we've got, what have we got? 20 minutes? 15, 20 minutes? Yeah, from now, I'll shut up, because this is about David, not me. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, and we'll go from there. We'll see how it goes, yeah?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm going to start with talking about the video that you recently opened up for Boxing Social, and you shared some of your experiences. So do you want to give us a quick breakdown of what you shared?
So I was out in Saudi Arabia for the AJ Ruiz fight, and the morning after the fight, one of the reporters, who I've got a good relationship with, do a lot of interviews, and I get on with him, trust him, he's fine. And he says to me, well, can we do a sit-down interview this morning? I said, yeah, no problem, as I always do. He says, we're going to do something a little bit different. Okay, no problem, sit down. I expect it to be a chat about the fight, which you would do. And I always say, it's like I said to Josh, whether I'm working with Sky or whatever, don't ever tell me what question you can ask me. I will always, I'm an open book. If I don't answer it, I'll just say no. but I will always be as honest and open, and I think I prefer that the answers are always natural rather than rehearsed for me. That's my personal preference. So he started talking about myself. Why did I get into boxing? Because I got bullied at school. I was like a classical school wimp. I'm the last person that you would ever expect to make a living out of boxing. I'm the last person that you would ever expect to be sat here talking in front of all these people here. I just wouldn't do that. And then, I forget the line of questioning, it ended up where I spoke about, I think I just said I got bullied at school and I had a bad time at home. And then he picked up on that. He's the first person that's ever picked up on that, really. And then he asked me basically about what happened to him. And for a split second I paused and I thought, do I say it or don't I? I'm 44 years old. I've never told anybody about my parents. I've never opened up about that. People understand. The people know I've done interviews where I've talked about being bullied at school, but I've never mentioned anything about my parents. And it just came out. I just felt comfortable. I don't know if because I was tired. I don't know what it was, but it just came out. And I said my parents are alcoholics. That's the first time I've ever said it out loud. I've not even said it to my family. My wife knows what I went through, but I've never actually used them words. And once I'd said it, and then he asked me to elaborate, and it just all came out. And basically, I would go to school, get beat up at school, come home, and I'd just be terrified. I'd be terrified of my mum. My dad was an alcoholic, but he was a big man. He was like Tony was 6'4", but he was about 18 stone, and he was always the one that as soon as he walked through the door, he'd come in with a glass of whiskey, and then as soon as he pumped himself down, he'd sit down. My mum would be in the kitchen. My mum would shout him, Tony! His name was Tony as well, by the way. I'm not just using your name. He'd get up, he'd go in the kitchen and help doing sandwiches and doing all whatever she wanted to do. And then she'd come in to sit down and both drink. I didn't think there was anything about that. And for years that went on. My mum, I didn't realise it was when she'd had a drink, but my mum just used to beat me up. And it was the point where every night when I'm laid in bed, I'd hear footsteps, when you hear the steps creaking. Yeah. And I'd absolutely crap myself because I'm thinking in my head, I'm trying to work out what I've done wrong, because what I used to have to do is I find this really embarrassing, but I've always been embarrassed about my past until I did this interview. I used to have to, when I get from school, hoover up all the house. Every Saturday morning, I would have to we lived in 3 stories, we had an attic, and then first floor to the ground floor. And I used to get a bucket of water, a scrubbing brush, and I used to have to scrub the carpets from top to the top of the house downstairs. And then I used to have to do the ornaments and polish all that, and that's why in my house you don't have ornaments and stuff like that. And if I did anything wrong, if anything was slightly off, she'd beat me. And she was about 11.5 stone, quite muscular woman. She used to do a lot of gardening, and she didn't used to slap me. She used to punch me. She used to put her knees in my back and pound away and beat me up. And I didn't realise anything about drink until when she went away, because my mum's Indian, my dad's English. So my mum went away, I think she went back to India for a few months, I think. And it was just me and my dad. And I remember when she left, at this point, I think I'd been about 12. And she said, make sure you look after your dad. Didn't think anything about it. Well, you just think it's what somebody says. So anyway, while my mum was away, my dad never went to work. And he just lay in bed all day. What's he doing in bed? I'd go to school, come back, get all my stuff ready, make a sandwich, and I'd just be in bed. He'd come downstairs, say 3 words to me, go back upstairs, and that's all he did. My mum was away for, I think she was about, if I remember, but she was away about a month, 6 weeks, something like that. It was over a month. And then I remember one day, their bedroom was in the attic, and as you come down the stairs, you can see under the bed. And I saw all these bottles, and I thought, what's that? So I've gone under, and literally there's loads of bottles. Teacher's Scotch whisky bottles, Bell's Scotch whisky bottles, Gordon's gin. That's the kind of stuff that I was finding. And then as it turned out, when Mum got back and she was going in cupboards and things like that, and there was just empty bottles absolutely everywhere, she just beat the crap out of me and said it was my fault. I didn't keep an eye on my dad. So that's when I understood that was a problem. But then when I think back to it, when I was younger, my dad was in Argentina. I remember they were getting a phone call and my dad was in hospital. He'd crashed his car. I didn't realise then he was drink driving. A little bit later, that's way I think in an argument, my mum being spiteful towards my dad, trying to make him look bad in front of me, told me that he was drunk when he was driving. But again, I didn't realise it was a problem until later on. But we'd go to Asda, and I remember the trolley. It literally have a row of teachers, a row of Bell Scotch whisky, a row of Gordon gin. And my mum would sometimes have some red wine. And that was it. And I would ask for like you get these little toy trucks. A little toy truck. I remember, it sticks in my head. The first time when I resented it a little bit, was I wanted a little toy SO truck, tanker. And my mum said no, because I never got anything. But I really wanted this truck. And then we went to the cash out, and I saw all this, because she said, no, we can't afford it. And I saw all this alcohol. That was the first time, I don't know how old it was, but that was the first time when I actually thought, and I resented it, and I thought to myself, you're spending all that money on alcohol, and I can't have, and it's not like I was a kid that had everything, and they never got me anything, but I really wanted this truck. And it's always stuck in my mind.
Yeah, because that's a big moment. So I appreciate you sharing that in the way that you have again. And I don't think we should ever take for granted what it takes for you to sit there and do that. By the way, I think as COAs we protect each other, so we all sort of have a laugh in certain moments because we recognise just quite how serious it is when you're talking about. Because it is. These are big things. And have you been surprised by the reaction that you've got online?
Yeah, so when I did this interview, I actually said a little bit more on that. I told about the day, because I left home at 15, and when the interview went out, or should I say before, so when I'd done the interview, immediately, it's weird because it's the first time I've ever said yes, my parents are alcoholics, and I felt like a weight was off my shoulders. But at the same time, because I knew it was going to be in the spotlight, and because I knew, it doesn't mean anything, but I've got a lot of followers on socials, whether it's Instagram or Twitter, and also because I've been working for Sky and being quite high profile in boxing, I was worried about what everybody's going to say, what everybody's going to think. It's like you get trolls and you get people slagging you off. If I put a photo of me and my daughter off on my socials, I get slagged off because she's told me. I'm sure, I get that, it's not a problem. Right? It's not a problem, but people go at it. So when you're getting stuff like that, then you lay your soul out there, you start worrying, and I was worried. And then I remember when it went out, I literally didn't look at my socials for it. So he texted me to tell me, and I didn't look at it for a few hours. And then when I looked at it, the response was unbelievable, all in a positive way. And since then, it's just that same interview, it's blown up that much where I've had adults, which I didn't expect, grown men, grown women messaging me, saying to me how much my words had helped them, and using words like inspiring them, and then sharing their stories. And I weren't expecting that. I weren't expecting that at all. I weren't prepared for that, and I was gobsmacked. I was surprised. And then more to the point for me is I've got kids messaging me, young kids messaging me, that are saying that they never saw a way out and they couldn't see a way out, and then they've listened to my interview and seen what I'm doing, what I'm doing. I'm working, because as far as they're concerned, not everybody wants to be a boxer, not everybody wants to be in sports. A lot of kids want to be seen on TV these days. So a lot of them will see me holding the mic for Sky Sports, talking on TV, and they'll look at it and think, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And that's what I want people to understand. So that response has meant the most to me.
Yeah. And I think that, like, I'm conscious of time. We've got 5 minutes? Yeah. 5 minutes, yeah. I think that is what, and it's really good that resilience has been spoken about, because probably more than anybody I've seen that's spoken about it, that your video really did come across of, like, you know, because you finished by saying some things about what it's done and how it's made you the man that you've become today. And do you want to tell us a little bit quickly about that?
Yeah, I've got 2 kids. I've got 2 absolutely wicked, brilliant, beautiful kids that are so switched on, so polite, so grounded. I never knew how to be a parent, but it was something I always... Right, if I'm totally blunt and I'm totally honest here, the only thing that kept me going when I was a kid, because I was that terrified of my mum and I had that much abuse by my mum, the only thing that kept me going is I always thought, one day, what happens if you stick with it and then one day you grow up and you have a nice family? And the other thing, there was 2 things. One day, you have a nice family and people know who you are. And they were the 2 things I wanted. So genuinely, I am the happiest guy in the world now, because I've got 2 kids, I've got a wicked wife who does this, always been by my side since I've had nothing since we were skin, everything. And people know I am. And so
my wife
not all you, but what I want to say is that when people say to you, do you wish that you didn't go through that as a kid? I went through torture as a kid. I mean torture. I left home because it was either going to be me that killed my mum or my mum killed me. And that's why I left home. And that was at 15. But I wouldn't change a thing, because it made me, I am a wicked dad, I'm a great dad. And it's because of what I went through. I'll never say I'm good at being a boxing coach, being on TV, anything. But what I will say, and I'll say it to anybody, I'm a really good dad. And that's because of the relationship that I've got with my kids. My kids have got the confidence and belief to think that they can achieve anything with hard work. And that's what I always instill with them. But I've learned that because I know how it feels when you've got parents telling you you can't do anything, your parents telling you you'll never do anything in your life. My mother still thinks I won't do anything in my life, by the way.
Yeah.
She still thinks that, and you know. But I believe that if you put that into your kids, then they're gonna take that and go with it.
Yeah. And look, I know we've finished the time, but from what was said by Camilla, how do we take it to the next stage and sort of focus on the positives? I think we found the answer, and it's you. So take that on your shoulders. And look, I'm really glad we found you. I was one of those people that messaged you on social media. Leary's messaged back. And look, I'm really, really grateful for you to be here with us, to be part of the
I'm really proud to be being asked and to be here.
Yeah. And look at what we've done.
I think this just shows that even if it is Hilary who's been talking and preaching and getting the good word out there for so many years, up to David now just recently opening up about it, the point is everybody keep talking and everybody keep pushing the message, because that's how we get the points across and that's how we find the growth. So well done to everybody on the panel. Awesome job.
Thank you, Dave. I really appreciate you being here, and I know you certainly made Piers and Josh's day coming here. You're like a little kid.
I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I know. It's
I'm
just
trying
so
to play it
lovely.
cool. When we got in, I was like, "Hi, Dave. Thanks for coming."
Yeah. But, thank you very much. And I think you will reach audiences that the rest of us haven't been reaching, and I think that is really important. And I really appreciate coming. I told you we were a nice group, didn't I? Yeah. Okay, so that's good. But really appreciate it. And the honesty in that interview is extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. So now we move to our last speaker, who is Geraldine James. And I'm sure all of you in the room know Geraldine from lots and lots and lots of TV and films. She's just everywhere, even on my favourite programme, Antiques Road Trip. So she's a national treasure, and she is also one of our patrons, which is why we know and love her. She became a patron after you did Desert Island Discs, do you remember? And John Fenston, who was chair of trustees at the time, heard you speaking on Desert Island Discs and was so taken by your openness and your honesty talking about your mum that he pulled over. He was pulled into a lay-by and I actually sat and listened and phoned me up and said, "Oh, have you heard it? You must listen to it. Geraldine James, we've got to get her as a patron." And he wrote to her and she said yes, and she's still here all these years later. Geraldine and Cherie actually both spoke at a fundraising dinner at the Vintners in 2007. And I met Geraldine before going into the room, and she told me that as a child she'd learned to lie, and so she thought as she was growing up that as she could lie so well, she would make a very good actress. And it was really interesting because I had the reverse experience. I was found out when I was 17 years old, and actually a boyfriend said something about your relationship with your father is unnatural, is what he said. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I've got to do something to learn better how to perpetuate the lie. But I found drama school very, very painful because you have to know yourself, and I couldn't do that. I didn't want to know myself in those days. We raised that like 40,000 between us, and which was absolutely amazing. And then the Radio 4 appeal in 2013, and I think that was the watershed moment for Nacoa and COAs, because we had a huge response, lots and lots and lots of money, lots of cheques, and lots of letters from people saying, that happened to me. And also lots of letters from people saying, I'd never thought about what it must be like to have a parent who drinks. So 2013, 2015, and all those years after have been great years, and lots of that is thanks to Geraldine.
Thank you. I'm completely overwhelmed by this evening, honestly. I'm so proud of Nacoa and of being a patron, and thank you for asking me here this evening. I'm considerably older than anybody else up here, and I was in my 50s before I told anybody about my mother's drinking, and it was actually on Desert Island Discs because I didn't want to tell a journalist because I knew they would then make it their own. Sorry, Camilla, but they might take my story and make, as indeed they have done subsequently, but they would make it theirs. I wanted it to be mine, so I didn't tell anybody I was going to say it. And halfway through my Desert Island Discs, I suddenly announced that my mother had been a drinker. Poor old Sue Lawley nearly fainted. And it was rather shocking for everybody. But anyway, as we've heard this evening, once it's out, it's such a wonderful relief. And it's so amazing to hear such incredibly different people just up here telling their stories. And the stories are all so different, but aren't they all so alike as well? And that's always so extraordinary to me. It's actually very difficult for me as an actor to talk about myself because it's not what we do. We speak other people's words, we wear other people's clothes, we stand where we're told to, we live in other people's times, other people's mannerisms. It's never about us. And I don't think that's an accident. I think I chose that way because of what had happened to me as a child. And I've been very lucky. I've done some lovely jobs, and I'm still doing them, and that's great. And it's a huge privilege. But it came out of a rather sticky area when I was brought up in the 50s in a rather posh house in Berkshire by an Irish mother and a cardiologist father. We have a strange relationship with time because of the fact that we move about in our work all over history. We can go wherever we like. So time is a peculiar thing. And what I realised as I was growing up was that I had a very peculiar relationship with time, and I could sometimes sort of get myself outside of it. And I'll just tell you about 3 stories that explain this. I did a television series called Blot on the Landscape once, and played this rather dotty woman who turned her family home into a wildlife park. And in the filming, we had a rhino, we had giraffes, we had some baby crocodiles who were delightful, and we had some lions. And there was a scene in the programme where I had to walk up to a lion and bark out a sort of instruction to it, and then carry on into the house. The lions came courtesy of Chipperfield Circus, and we were filming in Pembrokeshire somewhere, in this great big house in this courtyard. And we were preparing this shot, and always on films, the crew is a fairly large entity of people. And there was this poor old lion chained to the door while we rehearsed the scene. And I was standing there, and when the time came, they were going to release the lion and leave it sitting there. I had to walk up to it and go, "Be off with you, you lazy beast," and then go into the house. That's all it was involved. They got everything ready, they got the cameras ready, they got the crew ready. The crew were all in a sort of safe distance, but had to be near enough in order to shoot the scene. And I just noticed that this poor old lion was getting a little angsty. And anyway, everybody said, "We're going to go ahead with this." And so the crew all disappeared, the camera was turning, the lion was released from its collar and chain, and I was standing there feeling perfectly fine. I felt completely calm, I knew exactly what I had to do. The minute the camera turned and the collar was off the lion just, actually I don't think the collar was off, I think he broke it off. The lion just sort of ripped himself away from his moorings, leapt to his feet and charged. There was me standing completely alone in this courtyard, totally defenceless. And this lion just ran straight towards me and just came to me, and I could feel the sort of air whizzing past my ear as this lion shot past me and completely disappeared, along with at least 3/4 of the crew. And the extraordinary thing was that I didn't run away, I didn't cower, I didn't hide. My impulse was to reach out to the lion to save it, to stop him from running away. And afterwards they were going, "Christ, Geraldine, you're a bloody idiot. That lion, why didn't you run away?" And then, of course, we had to reshoot the scene and get the lion back again, and we shot it. It was all absolutely fine. But I just thought, what an extraordinary reaction, just not to have any sense of self-protection. I was in India doing Jewel in the Crown, and I was in a tiger reserve with a group of people, and we went out one night to have a look for some porcupines and pythons, lovely. And the guy driving the Jeep was a lunatic, and we crashed into a rock and turned upside down and had a huge crash and ended up in a ditch. And the guy who was driving took the only torch and ran off to get help. This is in the middle of Ranthambore in Rajasthan, in the north of India, in the middle of the night, in a tiger reserve. And we were all there under this Jeep, and one poor girl had cut her leg very badly. And all these people, there were about 6 or 7 of us, all of them weeping and wailing by the truck, and all I could hear was this petrol dripping out of the thing. And everybody was in sort of hysterics and just flapping about and going, "What are we going to do?" and running around and yelling for help. And I just got this girl with a bad leg, and I found something and I tore it up and I wrapped it around her leg. And I just made sure she was all right. And I didn't think about what I was doing, and I didn't find out until we got back to the house much later that I'd actually got a huge gash on my own leg that I hadn't even noticed. And it was just an extraordinary, practical, but at the same time completely weird and almost out-of-body experience. It really was. A few years before that, when I was living in London with my mother and having quite a difficult time with her, I came back to the flat one day to a rather eerie silence. She suddenly appeared out of the kitchen with a face full of fury and holding a kitchen knife in her hand and looking as if she was fully intending on hurting me. I didn't scream, I didn't panic, I just took the knife away from her. I loved her more than anyone else in the whole world, and I know that she loved me. But it was that same set of conflicting emotions, that almost a non-reaction, an inability to compute the given situation, a sense of fear, buried in a sense of loss of myself, all covered up in this behaviour of efficiency and ability. This was a habit, a coping strategy that I'd somehow learnt. Where did it come from? How did I learn it? And why? The same emotional reaction to these very different circumstances, the Jeep accident, the escaping lion, and the much-loved mother with a knife, well, inside me there were roots that linked these three things together. Now, I can't speak for the Jeep or for the lion, but my mother was an alcoholic. She was born in Ireland in 1911, came into England at 17 to train to be a nurse. She met my father at Guy's Hospital, and they worked there together all through the war and all through the Blitz. There are amazing stories about her being chased downstairs by an unexploded bomb, which I think might be a slight exaggeration, but anyway. And having to take the first day she spent in an operating theatre, she had to take a piece of shrapnel out of somebody's eye. But she still absolutely loved being a nurse, and I think was very good at it. My father was Welsh, well-to-do, training to be a cardiologist, came from an affluent middle-class family, but a family that needed to be seen to be doing well. They got married in 1945, and in those days, married women did not work. It was frowned upon. So my mother had to give up doing the thing that she loved. This had given her a sense of identity, and she had to become something that used to be called a housewife. She found the social life of young medics very intimidating. It was a huge sort of social world. I got photographs of them all sitting around with amazing ball gowns on, and there were a lot of cocktail parties and events, all involving alcohol. This humble young Irish woman just couldn't cope, and I believe she began to drink as a way of getting by. She was on her own in the house all day long and at parties every night. She had 3 miscarriages and then 3 children by the time she was 40. We were brought up in a wonderful, huge house with an attic, a pantry, a God knows what music room, secret hiding places everywhere, and a garden with stables and a summer house and later a swimming pool. Yes, it was a very privileged upbringing. We were very spoilt, and I use the word in its literal sense. But in another way, it was quite the opposite of privileged, for this was a house with a secret. Nothing was ever said. We were never allowed to ask why. Why hasn't Mummy made us any supper? Why aren't our school friends ever allowed to come here to play? Why is our mother up in bed with a headache again? Why does the vicar always have to come and pick us up because on the way home from school, Mummy drove us into a hedge? And the rows at night. My sister and I sitting on stairs outside the drawing room listening to horrible arguments with violence, but nobody there to tell us a thing about what was going on. No one ever taking us aside to explain or to reassure. One day, the 3 of us were in the drawing room with our father, sitting around waiting for Mummy, who hadn't appeared again. And my brother, the eldest, suddenly said, "She's drunk, isn't she?" Frozen silence. My father slapped him hard around the face and said, "Never say that word in this house again. Do you hear me?" We had literally no one to turn to, no one to ask for help. Nacoa did not exist then. Nobody had ever told us about Al-Anon or anybody else, and there seemed to be no outside help. So we ended up believing, as we all have somewhere down the line, that it was our fault. We probably spoke to each other about it and became unknowingly complicit accomplices within this secret, the silence. We held up a jointly brave face to the outside world, whilst inside we were all yearning for help. The 3 of us were very close, we loved each other and depended on each other. Our father was always a bit distant, probably out of despair, but we loved our mother, we adored her, and she loved us. When she was okay, she was loving, gentle, funny, kind. Talk about Jekyll and Hyde. We were all sent away separately to boarding school, and that's where I quickly became the school clown. I learnt the art of pretending. That's where it came from. I found that I could hide myself inside the Artful Dodger or Richard II and be accepted and even liked, something that I had never thought myself remotely worthy of. I was very naughty. They tried to expel me twice, but my father refused to have me home. When I was 14, my parents finally divorced and my mother moved into a flat in London, became depressed, was in and out of rehab, but she kept on drinking, and why would she not? I left school with 1 A-level and a love of Shakespeare. I was just beginning to believe a little bit in myself. And having apparently shone as Malvolio, this was an all-girls school, by the way, I was assured that I would easily get into RADA. I didn't. They told me I'd fallen like a horse at the first hurdle. So then what could I do? I had failed. All my old insecurities came back. I became bulimic and depressed. And my mother's extreme worry and conviction that I was a disaster really didn't help. Eventually I was offered a place at a place called the Drama Centre, and it turned out to be the perfect training. There it was that I learnt that actually it is the very damaged bits of myself, the broken bits that we've heard about this evening, that could help me most in my acting. To take the crap of my past life and to use it as compost for my future. Marlon Brando said, acting is simply about putting yourself on the stage. Use your imagination, use your life. And so I did. And acting became my life. My mother's drinking continued. Once when I was living with her in London, I decided I was going to be the one to save her, her saviour, or jailer. I made it my mission to stop her drinking. I searched out all the bottles of whiskey. I knew all the hiding places, under the bed, in the back of the cupboard, in the dishwasher. I'd find them all, empty them down the sink, and leave the bottles out for her to see so that she'd know that I was onto her. What a terrible thing to do. Her fury with me at that time led to the knife incident I mentioned earlier. I didn't know what else to do. There was no one I could go to for help. Needless to say, I didn't save her, it just got worse. When I was in rep, she used to come down and visit us in Exeter, and I'd scoop this drunken heap off the train and look after her for a few days and then send her back. She loved seeing the plays, although she'd always say things like, "Why don't you wear nice blue eyeshadow like that other girl?" Because we were in 3 weekly rep, just play after play after play, I hardly ever got back to London to see her or my brother and sister, who by now had very successful businesses of their own. An extraordinary thing happened. One Saturday night, halfway through a performance of Arms and the Man, a George Bernard Shaw play, and I was playing Raina, and I was on stage, and I suddenly had a literal, visceral, overwhelming need to see my mother. I just was hit by this sort of vision of her. And I asked around, and found somebody who was driving back to London after the performance. This was Exeter, and this was 1974, so there was no M3. So we drove up to London, and I arrived at my mother's flat in the early hours of the morning to find that there was blood over the doorstep and over the door. I knew where she kept the key. I got in, and there was blood on the stairs and all around the telephone. I was absolutely terrified. And I went upstairs very much expecting the worst. She was completely comatose, fully dressed, flaked out on the bed. She'd fallen and grazed her hands quite badly. I cleaned her up and put her to bed, cleaned up the house as best I could and went to sleep. I remember waking up in the morning and my mother was standing at the door looking at me with a sense of amazement and almost sort of wonder. All she said was, "You came." She told me that she had been thinking about me all the previous day and was feeling very sad because I was so far away. I told her that I'd had this extraordinary, unbelievable vision of her and that I knew I needed to get to see her. So there we were. Sometime later, she said that event had actually awakened a sense of faith in her, and she realised that she was not completely alone, that things could happen that were better. There were positive things to come out of this. And I believe that that was the beginning of the end of her drinking. And I'm very happy to say she managed 10 years of complete sobriety before she died at the age of 76. The phrase alcohol abuse is one I've never really understood. It's what Camilla was talking about, the social aspect of drinking. I've always thought that abuse of the social gift that is alcohol, something that everyone does and enjoys, sitting around with a group of friends and a glass of wine, that to abuse that social privilege was what was wrong. It was my daughter, training to be an art therapist, who pointed out to me that actually alcohol is the abuser. The alcoholic, or the child of the alcoholic, is the abused one. I have never thought of myself as an abused child. but in fact, in reality, that is what I am. That is what we are. I believe it's the job of a parent to hold a child, to make that child feel safe, to give them a base from which to grow, to find themselves. Children of alcoholics do not have that security. So I thank God for Nacoa, who by providing a place for these abused children to reach out, to speak about themselves and their lives, to feel safe, is doing much more for our society than people know. And I, for one, promise that I will do everything I possibly can to help Nacoa reach more and yet more children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Geraldine, and we've just heard so many different stories, and what you said there about your mother knowing she wasn't alone, I mean, it really is what I think binds us all together, this feeling that we are no longer alone, and how important that is. I'm going to bring it almost to a close now. I just want to pay tribute to John Fenston. John Fenston became a Nacoa trustee in 1995 and took over as chair of trustees when David Stafford died suddenly in 1997. Him stepping into the breach really cemented our lifelong association and friendship, and it is hard to remember or imagine Nacoa without John. John leaves an incredible legacy, and I can think of no better tribute to John, a kindly man, especially to children, than to dedicate our new children's book, Jasper's Wish, to his memory. I'm really delighted to say that Cherie Lunghi, another patron, she's narrated the audiobook, and I've been nudged into saying that this is a wonderful funding opportunity for someone to fund the animation of the book, to bring it alive. And Cherie's going to read a couple of passages from the book for us this evening.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much to all our speakers. I'm very moved, very honest and powerful. Thank you so much. Just before bedtime, Jasper's mum had asked him to call an ambulance. The man who came to help said that she had drunk too much alcohol and would need to see a doctor. After that, someone had called the Nanas. On Monday morning, Jasper came downstairs to find the Nanas making his favourite breakfast, apple pancakes with syrup. He wanted to say, yummy, but the first words that tumbled out of his mouth were, "Is it my fault that Mummy drinks too much?" The Nanas looked at him kindly, and then Nana Hannah said gently, "No, my darling, you can never make another person drink too much. It's absolutely not your fault." Nana Mindy pointed at an umbrella beside the front door. "Well, it's difficult to explain, but perhaps you could think of it being a bit like the weather. They say that it may rain today, but we cannot be sure. So let's take the brolly out with us. You may not be able to stop the rain falling, but you can keep yourself warm and dry if it does. And remember that there will be sunnier skies again one day." Jasper felt sad, but he understood. On Sunday, Jasper spoke to his mummy on the phone. Afterwards, he didn't know what to think. So he went to help the Nanas with their crossword in the kitchen. In a small voice, Jasper asked, "Does my mummy still love me?" Nana Mindy took his hand and softly said, "None of us can ever really know what is in another person's heart, but my feeling is that she does love you very much, even if it doesn't always seem like she does. See, drinking too much alcohol can do strange things to people. It can make them forget what is really important to them, or make them say or do things that they wish they hadn't. Nana Hannah said, "Do you remember why we don't have the radio on when we do our crossword?" Jasper replied, "Because it is too distracting." That's right, and for some people, drinking alcohol is just too distracting for them to be able to do almost anything else. But please remember that whatever is happening in your life, you are a lovable person. Whether or not you feel loved, you are worthy of love. Jasper felt a bit befuddled, but he understood.
I want to thank John for everything he's done for Nacoa, because I am not entirely sure Nacoa would have survived without him, to be honest with you. And all of you today, all of you are contributing to Nacoa, and what we have to do is to talk about this stuff, to dismantle stigma, because if we do that, parents will come forward and ask for help, and their children will come too. But when parents don't acknowledge they have a problem, what happens to their children? Well, they will remain lost in the family rules, don't talk, don't trust, don't feel, until we provide services that are accessible and where their specific needs are met and considered. Their need for consistency, they don't get that at home. The feeling of belonging somewhere, they don't get that at home. Feeling cared about, they don't get that at home. And being heard, which is priceless, and they don't get that at home. They also don't want to be judged, and they want to have as much control as possible. And what we need to do is ask nothing of them. Our service is freely given by people who truly care, and that's why people contact Nacoa. It's only when they trust us enough that they're going to join John Ashworth and put their head above the parapet. It is undoubtedly important to encourage children to speak out, to ask for help. But it's incumbent upon us adults, every single one of us, every single one of you in this room, to ensure someone is listening. Many more people are now talking about these problems, and many more people are doing all sorts of things with websites, and there is a national conversation, which is absolutely marvellous. But we have to listen to the children. We have to make for them as perfect a circle as we can. And that's by listening. And that's what Nacoa does and will always do. And I thank each and every one of you for coming. There were lots of you who wanted to come, lots more people. And thank you to all of our brave speakers, and I think we should give ourselves all a round of applause. Cassie's so good at reminding me things. Cherie, can you just take your... this is the book. It's written by Jessica Minato, who was at Bristol University, I'm glad to say, and she spent 4 years of her life at university being a helpline volunteer. And the two nanas are here tonight that she's based them on. Oh, they had to go. Oh, I'm so sorry, but the two nanas were here, so there were lots of comfort, but they've got the book. This is a really, really beautiful book. It's literally hot off the press, and we're not entirely sure what we're going to do, but what we'd like you to do is to make donations for it, and we'd like you to share it with anyone that you know. And hopefully, if we can get books like this in libraries, then children can pick them up and read about Jasper. It doesn't have to be about them. But actually, if we can give the messages that Jasper gets, that's what will help. So thank you all again.